So, the big question. Do you speak British English or American English? Let's find out! Because in this video I've prepared 50 different vocabulary differences between British English and American English, and let's find out which one you actually speak. Oh, and if you want to improve your British English, check out my brand new application, English with Lewis. And firstly, I'm going to tell you the American English of the word. Then I'll give you a few seconds to try to guess the British English equivalent. Does that sound good? All right, let's get cracking. Trunk. And in this case, it is referring to the storage space at the back of a car. In British English, we say boot. Put your bags in the boot. Continuing with a car, we have the hood. And in American English, the hood is the front of the car where the engine is usually underneath it. In British English, this is called the bonnet. Make sure you open the bonnet to see if everything's okay. Then if you run out of the fuel needed to keep your car running, in the US, you would, fill it up with gas. But in British English, we wouldn't say gas. Ugh, no, not at all. We would fill up the tank with petrol. Of course, because you go to a petrol station and this liquid is petrol, obviously. Duh! Now moving on to food, there are many differences between food items in American and British English. Let's start with cookie. Of course, Americans eat a lot of cookies. We use this word in the UK as well, but traditionally, we would say biscuit. Biscuit. Here I've got a cup of tea, and I usually have some biscuits with my tea. Now here's where it gets a little bit tricky. So in American English, they say chips. And when they say chips, what they mean is the ones that come in a packet, like Doritos or something similar. And, well, in the UK, we wouldn't use chips for this meaning. What we would say instead is crisps. Crisps. I'm going to go to a shop and get a pack of crisps. And if they're freshly cooked, a little bit thicker, you might have them with a burger or with fish. Here in the US, they would say fries or even French fries, despite the fact that fries are actually from Belgium, I'll have you know. But I think you know this already. In the UK, the equivalent is chips, because we have one of our famous dishes is fish and chips, obviously, which is absolutely scrumptious. It's yummy. It's delicious. Now this one, it drives me mad. So Americans, they say soccer because they have lots of different sports in America where only Americans actually watch these sports, but hey, that's another matter. They say soccer. We obviously, like the rest of the world, say football. I'm going to play football. I'm going to watch some football. I actually am going to watch some football later. And if you want to sound a little bit more colloquial, you can also use the word footy. I'm going to play footy. Do you want to come and play footy with me? Next, we have buildings where people live. It's quite international for people to say apartment in the United States. We sometimes use apartment in the UK as well, but traditionally, instead of using the word apartment, we would say flat. I've just bought a new flat. I'm renting a new flat. Do you want to check it out? Here we have some transport. And of course, we're not speaking about the shop where people go and buy sandwiches. No. We are talking about underground train systems. So and I'm sure you've seen that in New York, for example, they take the subway. Whereas in London, we get the underground, or better yet, the tube station. I'm going to get the underground, I'm going to get on the tube to go to London city centre. Then at the side of the road, well, this pedestrian area where people would walk, in American English, they call it the sidewalk, which makes a lot of sense, to be honest. And then in British English, we call it the pavement. I was just walking along the pavement when I fell over. So sidewalk and pavement. It's probably easier to remember the American one in this case. As we speak, it's a little bit dark. It's not very sunny back home in England, but you know, it's December, January. It's not expected to be sunny. But if it is completely dark, in American English, they would use a flashlight to light up the area. But in British English, we use maybe an old-fashioned word, which is a torch. So I'm recording on my phone, but if I wasn't recording on my phone, I could turn on my torch to see better, to light up the place. Now let's talk a little bit about rubbish. If you've got rubbish and you want to store it before you throw it away or throw it out, in American English, they'd call this a trash can. Whereas in British English, we just use the word bin. Traditionally, a dustbin, but most people just say bin. Chuck it in the bin. Throw it in the bin. Do you get what I mean? Now, what about if you're writing something down with a pencil and you want to, correct yourself? You want to erase it or rub it out. In American English, you would use an eraser. And in British English, we would use a rubber to rub it out. And this is a bit unusual, but in American English, a rubber is actually the name for a condom. So you gotta be careful with this one. We're back on the topic of food. So this vegetable that is black or purple on the outside and white on the inside, in American English, they call it eggplant. Whereas in British English, we use the French word. And this is similar for a couple of things. So in British English, this vegetable is called aubergine. I love fried aubergine. And similarly to that, the green one, which looks a little bit similar, Americans use the Italian word zucchini. Zucchini. Whereas the Brits, yes, we use another French term, which is courgette. Courgette is so versatile and tasty. Let's get into another confusing one. So if you're going out in the United States and you want to cover your legs, you could put on some pants. Whereas in the UK, some people would say pants, obviously jeans if you're being specific, but the proper word is trousers. So I'm going to put on some trousers and then head out. Then underneath your trousers in the UK, well, let's continue with the American one to begin with. In the US, they would say underwear. So I'm going to wear some underwear under my pants to cover my genitalia. And in the UK, most people would say pants. So in British English, pants is underwear. Whereas in American English, pants is trousers. I know, I'm sorry. It's confusing, but it is what it is. Today I'm wearing another Christmassy shirt, making the most of this period of time whilst I still can. But a lot of the time over Christmas, people will wear these crazy thick things which are kind of designed to have Santas or reindeers or silly Christmas things. In American English, it would be a Christmas sweater. You would wear a sweater. Whereas in British English, we would call it a jumper. So on Christmas Day, I was wearing a nice goofy Christmas jumper. Now, how about under a suit? If you're wearing a three-piece suit with this part on top of your shirt, in American English they call it a vest. Whereas in British English we use a different word, and I prefer this word, and it is a waistcoat. So for example, I'm getting married this year, and my suit is going to have a waistcoat. In other words, that extra layer between your shirt and your jacket. Ooh, this one's interesting because, well, my nephew, he's 2 years old and he's been potty trained at the moment because currently he still needs to wear diapers in American English so that, well, he doesn't poo his pants or wet his pants. But in British English, we use a different word, and it is nappies. So for the last couple of years, he's been wearing nappies. Continuing with babies, if a baby cries a lot or complains a lot, or you want to keep your baby quiet, then many parents will use this pacifier in American English. But in British English, we have a different word, which is strange, and it is dummy. Dummy. So my nephew doesn't use a dummy anymore, but he did when he was very, very young. And it's just to keep, keep babies quiet, I suppose. As you know, I'm at my mum and dad's at the moment, and in front of me, I can see the outdoor storage area where I maybe used to play football when I was a kid, or we had barbecues. In American English, they call this the yard. But in British English, we have the French word, which is garden. I have a back garden and a front garden. And I used to play in the garden when I was growing up. What about in the kitchen? So if you want to drink some water that comes from, the tubes, you would turn on the faucet in American English. But in British English, we use a different word, which is tap. And if you go to a restaurant and you don't want to pay for mineral water, you can always ask for tap water. And another note on that, all of the tap water in the UK is drinkable and it's delicious. And by law, they have to give you tap water if you ask for it. So what's the point in paying for water? Now the 25th one, and a nice and easy one. If you're not working, you are perhaps on vacation. Vacation. Always without the S. That's the American term. In British English, as you know, it is holiday. You can go on holiday or on holidays. Both are correct. I'd love to go on holidays. Maybe in summer. Who knows? Then, if you're a little bit sick and you need some medicine, some drugs to heal you, you would go to the pharmacy in American English. We can also use it in British English too. But historically, let's say, in British English, it's more common to say the chemist or the chemists to pick up some paracetamol, for example. Now, transporting on highways or motorways, in American English, these long vehicles, big vehicles, are known as trucks. Trucks. Whereas in British English, we use a different word, and it is lorry. Lorries. My friend is a lorry driver, and it's quite difficult to pronounce. If you say red lorry, yellow lorry, it's a tongue twister in English. You've got to say red lorry, yellow lorry as quickly as possible and as many times as possible. Red lorry, yellow lorry. I can't do it. This one is maybe more of a pronunciation thing than a vocabulary thing. But that kind of silver, metal, material, whatever it is, in American English, they would say aluminum. Aluminum. Whereas in the UK, we pronounce it differently, and a lot of Americans will make a joke about this because we say aluminium, aluminium, which to me makes perfect sense. Which one do you prefer, aluminum or aluminium? Please say British. Now let's talk about seasons. Of course, we have winter, we have spring, we have summer, and in the US, they have fall. I guess because trees, their leaves fall. But in British English, we say, of course, autumn. I love autumn. Great season. Now, speaking a little bit about punctuation. If you're writing something down and you want to put a little dot, in American English, they would say period. Period. Whereas in British English, we would say full stop. And we can also use it as a way of saying that something is non-negotiable. We are going to go on holiday to the Bahamas, period. Full stop. This next one is my least favorite school subject. And it's a very, very minimal difference between American and British English. They say math without the S, and we say maths with the S. Did you like maths at school? I hated it. And I'm going to go out after I record this video, and if I was American, I'd say, I'm going to put on my sneakers. But Brits don't say sneakers. The word we use instead is trainers. I'm going to put on my trainers because I'm going to walk to my friend's house. Now, if you have a baby, if you want to transport your baby, you put them in this thing. In American English, they call it a stroller. You can push it and carry your baby. But in British English, because you push it and it's like a chair, we call it, ding, a pushchair, of course. Sometimes I will use a pushchair with my nephew. Not so much anymore because he's a bit old, but I used to do it at least. Now, if you receive a letter or something similar, you get mail in American English. Email. Easy peasy. But in British English, we don't say mail, we would say post. You've got some post. I got it in the post box or mailbox in American English. And if you are ordering something online and it's an American website, sometimes it will ask you for your zip code, which is the code that shows your address. While in British English, we would use the word postcode. You have to enter your postcode, which I think is more international because in Spanish it's código postal. So, British English, maybe it's more international. This next one is, a little bit more controversial because in fact, in British English, we use both words. But in American English, they would say schedule, schedule, and some British accents also use the word schedule, but traditionally, a Brit would say schedule, schedule, schedule. Or we could use the synonym, which is timetable. My timetable is so busy at the moment. If you are going to apply for a job in American English, you need to submit your resume. Resume. Very French, if you ask me. Whereas in the UK, we would say your CV, which stands for Curriculum Vitae. I don't remember the last time I updated my CV. It's been ages. And what's the place called where you hang up and store lots of your clothes? Well, in American English, they say your closet. Your closet. And if you are declaring that you are homosexual, you come out of the closet. And in British English, we use wardrobe. I have lots of shirts in my wardrobe. Now, in general, a place where you go to buy things is a store. But in British English, we use the word shop. Because, you go shopping. You don't go storing, do you? I am joking, by the way. I don't actually hate Americans, I promise. It's just friendly banter. Little jokes, you know? Now, how about this metal storage item where you can have drinks or, like, let's say maybe cured or stored fish? In American English, they'd call it a can. Whereas in British English, we would call it a tin. And just on that note, in the UK, we use can for drinks. A can of Coke, a can of Fanta. But we use tin for tuna. A tin of tuna, a tin of beans, a tin of chickpeas, for example. Now, if a shop is full of people, then in American English, they would say there is a big line, which makes perfect sense. You could maybe use it in the UK, but we probably wouldn't. The word that we would use instead would be queue. There's a huge queue, such a long queue. I have to queue up. Let's talk about the school system. So, in the school system in the United States, you have grades. First grade, second grade, third grade. In the UK, we don't say grade. Instead, we just say year. Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and so on and so forth. Continuing with that word, in the US, they also use grade for a different meaning. So if you do a test, you do an exam, you could get a good grade. If you get an A, it's a fantastic grade. This is more American. Whereas in the UK, you get a mark, a high mark. I got 10 out of 10. I passed with flying colours. I got really high marks. Now, I don't know if I can explain this to you, but if you go to a fair, it's quite common to be able to buy this pink, blue, or yellow kind of sugar that looks like clouds. In American English, they call it cotton candy. You know, because it looks like cotton, I guess. And they have cotton in the US. But in British English, we call it candy floss. Why? I don't know. Don't ask me. But when I was younger, I used to want to buy candy floss. So I'd beg my mum, Mum, can you get me some candy floss? Please. Let's keep going with some food. And this herb is, you know, it's like Marmite. You either love it or you hate it. And it's very common in Mexican food. And in fact, in the US, they use the Spanish word, cilantro. They say cilantro. But in the UK, we use the word coriander. Personally, I love coriander, but my fiance doesn't like it. You know, what are you gonna do? Now here's another one that kind of depends, because Americans, they call it dessert. And you can also use dessert in the UK. No problem, 100%. But a nice alternative, which is a little bit more colloquial or slang, is pudding. So I could ask my mum, like, what's for pudding? Is there any pudding? And I'm not just referring to pudding. I could be referring to chocolate or ice cream. But in the UK, we call dessert pudding as well. Hello, yeah, no problem. All right, see you soon. Sorry, I was just talking on the cell phone in American English, or in the UK, we would use mobile phone. But I have to say, this is changing over time because nowadays not many people have a landline, so they just have one phone. And of course it is a mobile phone. So this one, yes, it still exists as a difference, but over time, I'm sure people will stop saying my cell or my mobile, and they'll just stick to the word phone. Let's go back to roads. I mentioned this one earlier, but I didn't really explain the difference. So if you have a big road with lots and lots of traffic, in the US, they would call it a highway. Think of a song, it's a classic. I'm on a highway to hell. Highway to hell. Sorry about that. And in the UK, we wouldn't really use the word highway. Instead, we say motorway. And a lot of the motorways, their codes begin with M. So the big motorway that takes you from London to the north, Leeds, is the M1 because it's a motorway. Moving on to knives, forks, and spoons. Maybe both are accepted, both sides across the pond, but usually in American English, they would call this silverware. You buy some nice silverware. And in the UK, it's much, much more common to just say cutlery. And to go a little bit more into detail, generally speaking, silverware is a posher way of putting it, and cutlery is a more practical way of calling it. I'm sure there are many other words that I could go over, but let's finish with one more. And there are other differences between the pronunciation of the same words as well. But the last one is a dessert very common for kids, for children. That's another one. In American English, they usually say kids and we say children, but both are accepted. But anyway, this dessert in American English is called Jello, or in British English, it is just jelly. And now I'm explaining this, I'm thinking of other differences, because in American English, the strawberry or raspberry thing that you spread on your toast, in American English, they call it jelly. Whereas in British English, we call it jam. You know, strawberry jam. You have some toast, butter, and jam. Lovely. So I think that's enough. And let me know in the comments, if you've made it all the way here, do you speak more American English or British English? And don't worry, you're not going to offend me if you've chosen the American options, because at the end of the day, there are so many series and films and artists that use American English much more than British English. And despite British being the original, languages are constantly evolving. The population of the United States is much bigger as well. So yeah, let me know in the comments. Do you speak more American or British English? And don't forget that if you want to improve your British English, you can download my brand new application, English with Lewis. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to ask. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!